Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FIDE Candidates 2022. There are 8 players playing a double round robin, which is a 14-round tournament to determine who will be the next challenger against Magnus Carlsen for the World Championship match. Or if, as previously claimed by Magnus, he is uninterested in the conditions, he will abandon his title, and 2 other dudes will play for it. So first and second place potentially could be up for grabs. I don't know, we will see. The standings after 3 rounds, not the most important because there's still a ton of games remaining, and in this recap, someone gets absolutely obliterated. And we will get to that game. As always, we are sponsored by very colorful shirts. That's it. That's just the name of the company. So we're going to kick things off in the game between Richie Rapport and Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru yesterday a monumental defensive task, and he has a double black, so he will try to defend against Rapport. Rapport opens the game with e4, and we have a Spanish. Now, as we've seen Hikaru already play this against Fabiano, he is most likely going to play a Berlin. That seems to be his most comfortable weapon against the Spanish. And Rapport does not enter a Berlin endgame after castles, knight e4, d4, knight d6, bishop c6, dc6, de5, knight f5, queen d8, king d8. This does not happen. Instead, Rapport plays the move d3, which is exactly what Fabiano played against Hikaru. Now we have bishop c5. You'll remember that Hikaru played the move knight b to d2 against Timur Rajabov himself. So there's been a lot of these anti-Berlins. But in this game, we have more or less the same opening that Hikaru chose against Fabiano, except Fabiano played, instead of short castle, he played the plan with knight b d2. Or maybe short castle, then knight b d2. But in general, knight b d2, etc. But in this game, Rapport plays bishop g5, which is one of the moves. Black also has a variety of choices. He can go back to d7 and then f6. He can play queen e7. He can play bishop g4. But in this game, he repeats the same line, h6, bishop h4. Now, Hikaru actually has had a game like this with Black against Wesley So in 2021. And he played that game bishop to e6. And then Wesley, I don't exactly remember what he played. Wesley might have played d4. And then Hikaru played bishop g4, pinning the knight to the queen. Something along these lines. But in this game, Hikaru, for the second game in a row, lashes out with g5. And he just completely removes the bishop entirely. And in a stunning display of opening preparation, gives away a center pawn. So Hikaru's like, go ahead and take it. The thing is that Black might want to play knight d7 here guarding this, but that's really passive, because now you're never going to get this bishop out. But it seems insane for Black to play bishop e6. It's a reason nobody has ever played like this. Right? I mean, Hikaru is playing in a way that nobody's ever played before. But here's the thing. If White were to take with the bishop, then after bishop e5, knight e5, very quickly, White wins the pawn back on b2, right? That's the idea. White's just going to win the pawn back on b2. But if you take instead of with the bishop, you take instead with the knight, then Black apparently has time to play h5 and threaten to trap the bishop. So this line, in some absurd fashion, now you would get queen d4 by playing this move. This might still be the top engine line. For example, knight g5, queen d4, king h1, queen b2, knight d2, long castles by Black. Like, Hikaru very well could have had all of this in his preparation, long castles. I don't know. I don't know. Instead of that, Rapport plays the move queen to d2 with the intention of at some point putting the queen on c3, which is kind of what he does. Now he lashes out with d4, and then this seems to be his plan, stockpiling pressure on the e5 pawn. The problem is that Black is ultra solid with queen e7, and he still has the flexibility of castling in either direction, as he has made a legendary peace cube, and a peace cube is very rare indeed. And once Hikaru activates the powers of the peace cube, Richard is compelled. That's not really how you say his name. It's either Richie or like Richard Rapport. It's very difficult for me to pronounce his name for some reason. But anyway, we get a bunch of trades, and we get 2 rooks and a knight each, and 7 pawns. Only White really, you could argue, has the advantage here, because White has a mobile 4 pawns versus 3, whereas Black's 4 pawns are not as mobile, right? So f4, g3, f4 is an idea. Maybe getting this knight to the e3 square, followed by knight f5, dominating the d file. What does Black want to do? Be solid, which is why his king stays in the middle. A rook will go to d8, and he takes space with the flank pawns. Right, so G and H pawns here are going to take some space. Hikaru plays a very interesting idea here, G4, effectively preventing this plan. Like, if Rapport now plays G3, there is no F4, knight G5, and Hikaru is positionally completely winning now. H4 is coming, so G4 is a very interesting idea. And here comes the rook to the D file. Here comes a swap of rooks. You'll notice that Hikaru doesn't rush to trade the rooks. There is no need to do that. The white rook cannot really cause any problems anyway. And if you play knight E3, knight F5, I will just take a pawn. So it's actually Hikaru who's causing Rapport to play a little bit differently, not to play really like to the knight in the middle. And Hikaru obviously here probably the most important move of the game that he played was c5, because Rapport here is kind of causing black some problems, and you really want to avoid moves like rook b8 in the endgame, because rook b8 just means you might almost never move again. I mean, you temporarily solve this, but you can never play b6 because knight c6. You cannot play c5 and then b6 because knight c6. And white might just slowly expand, so Hikaru finds a beautiful move here, c5. Knight b7 is a possibility, but then rook b8 is a dynamite strike. You lose a second pawn, but this pawn falls, and it's actually black who is wolf in the hen's house, wolf in a pig's pen. I always forget the quote. So instead of that, Rapport plays it safe, gets the a7 pawn, loses the a2 pawn, not the b2 pawn, not the b2 pawn. So his pawns kind of fall one at a time, and we have a massive simplification of rooks, pawns, and all the pawns fall off the board, and the players agree to a draw in this position. Actually, I think one more move got played. I think technically I think Hikaru played a move. I think officially the game technically doesn't end in a draw here, because theoretically you could mate yourself, like in the corner of the board, but the players just agreed to a draw. And a very, very solid display of opening preparation once again by Hikaru. I mean, honestly, just amazing. The next game that I have for you is the game Jan Krzysztof Duda versus Timur Rajabov. This one is interesting because Duda has played very well this event. Rajabov very shaky with the black pieces against Hikaru, which is why Duda goes for the exact same line, the anti-Berlin. And this time doesn't play knight bd2, but opts for bishop to g5, another sideline in the anti-Berlin. And if you didn't catch the live broadcast, I actually live streamed with Anish Giri. Shout out to Anish. I live streamed with him for a few hours, and he was telling me that the methodology, like to playing Timur when you have the white pieces nowadays, seems to be to challenge him in a lot of grounds of opening preparation, particularly this line. And Timur misplayed. I mean, he played h6 d6. Oh, I gotta crack my back. Oh, there we go. You didn't hear it because I have a noise gate, but you ever like feel like you really gotta pop some? All right, beautiful. And in this position, white has a variety of different plans in the e4, e5 structures, but Duda plays something fascinating. Knight c3, first of all, just so you understand, like we go from a position that has been reached hundreds, if not thousands of times at top level, to a position that has almost never happened. This just doesn't seem to be the optimal approach. And now Duda just goes for the bishop. Like, he can do this. You know, black could play bishop back to b6, and then white will just grab the two bishops and say, okay, I have a bishop pair, maybe I'll try to like expand in the center. But Rajabov here induces a couple of pawn moves, and it's not even clear if that is good or bad. Like, is this good for white or bad for white, right? I mean, I don't know. Now Duda castles, and here we have a big question. Like, Duda could take the bishop, or the knight. If he takes this first, he damages the structure here. Black will be forced to go that way with the king. And then maybe you actually have an advantage. Like, maybe after this massive exchange, you kind of already are prepared to attack on that side of the board. The guy helped you. But you can also, instead of that, take on b6 first and figure out something. If you take the bishop, then this knight could take back. And now you cannot damage the structure anymore. Maybe you play d4. Duda spends a little time here and does exactly what I described. And now he has the knight zigging and zagging out to the edges of the board. That's defended. And Rajabov does, in fact, go long. So Duda does this. And now really comes the million-dollar question. Why did Duda not play a4? I mean, that move is screaming to be natural. But maybe he didn't like the counterplay of f5 on this side of the board, because a5 is a little bit too slow. Like, you can come in with ab, but I prevent checkmate by playing this move. Threatening to take your knight, also various checkmating ideas if the knight moves, and I'm kind of threatening the queen trade as well. Rook a8, the king is actually shockingly safe on the d7 square. So Duda must have not liked some sort of counterplay over here and played queen f3, which prevents the move f5 because now white controls it 3 times, so black can't play f5. And here in a shocking turn of events, Timur Rajabov plays the move f5 anyway, and it turns out that Duda was incorrect. I don't think Duda missed f5 necessarily. Maybe he thought that, you know, he still had some ideas here. But the point is that no matter what takes, like if you take with a knight, then you take with a pawn or the queen, ultimately, once the white pawn lands here, here comes rook g5, and white just can't defend the pawn. It doesn't matter in what order you do it. I mean, it could be knight f5, ef5, rook g5. Like, this is just not gonna work because black will play rook g8, and even h5 is a brutal move. By the time you've defended everything, suddenly you are just getting blasted by the rooks. So Duda plays a move completely preventing f5, Rajabov plays f5 immediately, gets his pawn back, and Duda begins the attack. But, you know, you're not gonna checkmate a guy by trading the queens. So Duda keeps the queens on, but now it's Rajabov who's actually asking the questions of the position, right? Rajabov has the active rooks. Duda now is like, all right, let's trade and let me take this file. Rajabov's like, not so fast, buddy. But even here, Rajabov could have maybe played king d7 with ideas of pressuring as well as just going to the a file and using that advanced a pawn against white. But he goes here, and g3, it's a mildly tense position, but nothing really to write home about. King d7, it's rook and 6 versus rook and 6. The rook cannot infiltrate. This rook really cannot pose any problems because rook a1 at all times. White activates his king, bringing it to the middle, but not too far as, you know, you can hang a rook. And we have a little delicate dance here. You can trade h for a. You can go down here. If you play rook a3 here, I will play rook f6 and then rook back. So we have a little bit of a dance. Pawns begin flying off the board, and the players agree to a draw after 41 moves. Actually, technically, they don't agree. They just repeat moves. So it was a chance for Duda. He was definitely better from the opening, but like he had to transform the position in the correct way. And it seems like the bishop takes f6 plan wasn't that good. After all, it was a nice job by Rajabov. And maybe Duda had to play for d4 faster than knight h4. Like even here, you know, maybe... Oh, there was an interesting stockfish plan here to play takes, and you know what? Not queen f3, but g3. And do you know what the idea of g3 is? It's to play knight g2 and knight e3. For example, if queen to h3, knight here, and f4. That is what the machine wants. It wants white to play g3, maybe knight to g2, and maybe f4. Not because f5 is a good piece of counterplay. So a game is a game, a draw is a draw. The next game I have for you is Ding Liren versus Caruana. Now, Anish pointed out that this is Ding's third white in 4 games. Like, he started this event with 3 white games against Report, Caruana, Nepo. The Nepo game, we know what happened, right? So a really disastrous start for Ding Liren. Like, disastrous. I mean, and he has to win. He has to win a game with white, right? So he goes for this setup. Queen's Gambit declined, and he is like one of the world's leading experts on the Catalan. But, as Anish described, in this game he chose not to go for it because perhaps he reviewed some of Fabiano's games, and Fabiano recently has been playing in a certain way against the Catalan, like maybe dc4, bishop b4, maybe just bishop b4, whatever. And Ding didn't find anything inspiring in his own notes. He couldn't really pose any problems like if Fabiano played his regular stuff. So instead, he tried to take a gander out into the Queen's Gambit declined mainline position. Fabiano plays the most aggressive move, which is bishop to b4, not choosing semi-tarash, but choosing this. I had predicted that this would happen at the beginning of the tournament. Fabi choosing also not to play the passive Queen's Gambit declined, as he had against Magnus in the World Championship match of 2018. And now, an interesting situation. What is Ding going to play against the Rogozin? He plays queen a4 check, which does not win a piece, but it is one of the main lines for black to block his own c-pawn. e3 solidifying the center, castles. And here the general game plan for white is to play bishop d2 to block the pin, bring the queen back, something like this, and then decide what's going on. Do we play a3? Do we play bishop e2? There's some variations. You attack on the king side. What's going to happen in the center with black's pawns? Will they take? Will they be taken? Will they play e5? It's an incredibly rich and complicated position. So Ding plays queen c2, expecting one of 10 replies by black. I mean, rook e8, knight e7, b6. I mean, there's so many lines here, right? The bishop going backwards. In this position, Fabiano Caruana plays a move that has never been played in a classical chess game. It has been played once in a banter blitz game by Matthias Blubaum from Germany. Knight a5. I am talking thousands of games, and Fabiano plays a move that has never happened ever in classical, ever, not once. There is one game that I found in the database, and it was a online blitz game with blue bomb with white, with black, and I don't even know who was white. Okay? What is the idea? Well, you want to play c5, but you also want to make white make a decision with this pawn. You want to force the issue. If this proves to be a problem for white, where white cannot prove an advantage, the Rogozin as we know it in this variation could be in trouble. Like, you'll notice that Ding did not play bishop d2. He played this move order. Bishop d2, knight a5, you obviously lose the bishop, so that doesn't work. But queen c2 specifically, now people have to do their homework. So he plays c5. Now b6, immediately attacking the pawn. Ding plays bishop d2. He can also play a3. a3, there is this, hitting the knight and preventing this, but black might come in with knight e4, very dynamic and complicated position. Okay, queen c2, bc, and now b4, according to Stockfish, is a very powerful move. But if you don't know that ahead of time, you're never going to play it, right? So bishop d2, and Caruana keeps driving his pieces forward. He takes. Here there is another interesting line that Anish told me about in the broadcast. A b4, knight f3, gf3. Rook g1, bishop d3 ideas, but black is quick with counterplay. a5, e5. I mean, a lot of pawn breaks here to just mess things up. Ding goes for the most solid approach, which involves control of the c-file and this position where he will take, have a completely symmetrical pawn structure, but just be annoying his opponent. You know, kicking him under the table, you know, breathing really heavy. You ever play a person or sit across from a person who goes... Like, shit, bro, what are you doing? Learn to breathe properly, you bozo. Like, seriously. So, you know, Ding is just going to try to bother his opponent. Fabiano trades off the light squared bishop. Here, Fabiano probably should have waited for Ding to move his bishop before he did this, so that white would have had to waste a move, if that makes sense, right? But instead of that, Fabiano went for this position, just thinking he must not have any problems. Here's the thing. He does have problems. It's actually very difficult for black to make a move here. Like, let's say black just plays queen d7. White is going to trade the queens, completely dominate the only open file, so white controls the only open file, and then white will double up on this open file, slide over, go here, take the pawn, win the endgame. So what the heck is Fabiano gonna do? I mean, Ding is just gonna impose his will on this position. He's gonna kick him under the table, he's gonna spill water onto him, and then call it an accident. We got cameras, but he's gonna do it in such a way, you know? Maybe Ding will turn on a Theragun in the middle of the round, you know? Maybe he will just like, and then all of a sudden we're gonna have some massage noises. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You think they would allow Theraguns? Not a sponsored stream, by the way, just have this here. You know, I sit a lot, I gotta massage my shoulders. Anyway, I don't know what the heck's going on in this recap anymore. We just got a Theragun here. Anyway, so yeah, like, you never know. So what does Fabi do? He loses his pawn. He just gives the pawn away completely. This is a very common idea in endgames. To lose a pawn, but you better be damn sure that when you lose that pawn, what do you get for it? Activity. Fabi sacked the pawn to completely control the c-file. Now white can no longer play rook c1 because he would lose the rook. If this is the position, white is completely winning because white is up a pawn and has all the benefits of the position, right? But this way, black gets activity. Uh-oh, Ding tries to trade the pawns, but look at now, here comes the knight. And the only thing that survives is the a pawn. Black will play rook here, or rook c8, play h6, so there's no back rank mate, and win the pawn back. Ding plays very intelligently here. He swamps the queens, and in this position plays knight c5. Perhaps he could have also went f3 here to try to do the whole danger level thing and get an endgame that might have been better for him, but Fabi might have still had dynamic possibilities here, like rook a8 to win the pawn, rook b1, rook a4, rook b3. It's not really clear if this is a winning endgame or not, but this is one of the things that Ding maybe could have gone for. Instead, Ding goes for a pure rook endgame. Rook in 6 versus rook in 5, and white can't just go here because black is active. So for example, if black plays rook a8 and white plays rook c1, there's rook takes a4. And even though it looks like the pawn gets away, it doesn't, because you can't take, because rook a1 is mate. And by the time you play h3, I can get this, but you come here, you come here, and this. Now you have to see this. When Fabiano goes for this entire sequence, like all the way back here, literally on move 18, when he does all this, Fabi has to see all that. Fabi has to see 10 moves into the future. We've only played 19 moves. He's got to see 10 more moves for both players, so 20 moves into the future, and be like, I don't think there's anything that Ding can do here. Fabi saw all of this. He saw all of this. Maybe he didn't see a4 and necessarily all the best, but he had to foresee all of this and be like, no, I think this is a draw. I think this position is a draw, because if it's not, I'm dead. So Ding tries his best, but here comes the c-pawn is going to sacrifice itself to deflect the rook And now black is going to corral the c-pawn. Like, there's nothing. White is too far. If white gets his king to c4, he wins, but he's too far. By the time the king and the rook arrive, all Ding can do is go for this, but Fabi knows he can lose this pawn and win this pawn. And it's a draw. So they know that. They know what pawns can be swapped off to force a draw. This is a draw. You can't win this with white. Because black has a perfect situation. He's down a pawn all on the same side of the board. Rook and pawn versus rook is a draw. More often than not, especially when the pawn starts all the way back. Ding tries his best, but this is the same endgame we had in Rajaba Firouzja. You remember that game from round one? Remember? No? You don't remember? Are you lying? Did you even pay attention? Did you just like watch me in the background? Anyway, doesn't matter. This game ends after 64, 65 moves with a repetition. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you had the patience to make it this far in the recap, I had to save the best for last because good lord, was this game absolute savagery. This one was a guaranteed banger. Like, you knew this was going to be a wild game. And yeah, Nepo played e4, and he's currently in great form. Firouzja plays the Sicilian, and after 5 moves, we have a Najdorf Sicilian, which is one of the most complex lines in all of chess. Now, the one Najdorf that we've had, which was Fabiano versus Duda, went f3, e5, knight b3, and then Duda played h5. So what Duda did is he basically prevented white from expanding with g4. Now, you could maybe even do that now. I don't remember if Duda did it at this point or he did it right here. But I believe that, you know, at some point he played h5. This is the more modern treatment of this position. White cannot play the move g4. However, there is another plan entirely, which is allowing the opponent to get whatever he wants on the king side, which is the move g4. And that is what Firouzja does, and Firouzja plays b5. Ladies and gentlemen, the gloves are off. All right? These guys are hockey players. They've just dropped the gloves, and these aren't those, like, hockey players who never fight. You know what I'm talking about? Like, they get in a fight, they like wrestle each other, they barely get the gloves off. Like, no, I'm talking Aaron Asham. All right, what's the guy's name? Was that Colton Orr? I don't remember. I remember Aaron Asham used to scrap with everybody back in high. Like, these dudes are seasoned fighters. They about to scrap. That's what's about to go down. All right, the game plan is white does this and black does this and someone loses. Okay, so we're following the top line of the engine, which is g5, b4, okay, not engine, theory. Knight e2, knight back to e8, and f4. I mean, I'm telling you, it's just full steam ahead, okay? Now, the reason black never wants to address white's attack here is because you just kind of trampoline some pieces forward. Either of those moves is good. Knight f4, bishop f, and like, black doesn't want to do this because there's always rook g1. You're just inviting trouble onto your own king. So that move gets completely ignored with a5, f5, and in this position, there are two very popular moves. One of them is to take the knight, because you don't have a bishop anymore. White has to recapture like this, and black will continue to pound away. White might take, black might take, attacking this pawn. White might play king b1, knight c1, and just basically breathe. Okay? But believe it or not, there is even a move rook a2 in this position. Yeah, I'm not joking. King a2, queen a8, king b1, queen e4 is a fork. I'm gonna leave this here. You don't need to know this. The other line after bishop takes b after f5 is to just ignore and play a4. Okay? And theory goes on from here. Alireza plays the third move, which has been played about 90 to 100 times out of about 8,000? Which is this. Now you might ask yourself, what is the point of that move? The point is that you want to not trade and you want to not lose your bishop. So if white plays a move like h4, you just want to keep pounding away on the queen side. Which is why after bishop c4, the most logical move, well, logical is a stretch, but I would say the most popular move is this. To just trade the bishop. And then this, and black's attack continues and you play knight a1. But knight a1 is not logical. That's why I corrected myself. It's not the most logical way to play. This is what the engine wants. The engine likes the knight on a1. I mean, knight on a1 is a middle finger to all chess concepts. Or pointer finger, or ring finger. Parents, you can explain, middle finger is just the longest one. That's why. It's you just digging myself a little bit of a hole here. Sometimes parents actually complain in my comments. They're like, you shouldn't have said that. I like to watch with my kid. And I'm like, you know what, parents? No disrespect whatsoever. I grew up in New York. I knew all the words and I knew all the gestures by the time I was like 10. But my parents taught me when to not use them. That's the secret sauce. Like, don't use them in school, etc. So yeah, this is not very good. But don't worry, parents, I got your back most of the time. That's not very good. This is just not okay. This is not okay. Instead of that, Jan moves his knight to c1. I just mentioned in the other line that the knight likes to defend a2. And Firouzja here plays d5. We are still following all theory ever played, like especially in correspondence games. And the whole point of this is that you're going to sack the pawn to open black's king. You're going to play f6, boom, 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 but the king is open, okay? Now here's the problem. Alireza started thinking here. That's not good, because this is a really bad position to handle on your own. This is a hot potato of a position. All right? This is like you going on MasterChef, but it turns out you don't know the basics. I don't know how you even got auditioned for the show. I don't know what happened. This is really, really bad, because White's attack is very simple. White's position plays itself. Okay? Black's position is the delicate one. According to the machine, it's 0-0-0. But what are the moves? And this is actually something Anish was kind of criticizing, because Alireza obviously prepared knight g3, but why did he not remember this? This is the second line of the engine, and it's very human. He didn't remember. So all of this happens. Knight f6, we have knight g3, and now two engine moves for black. You can either play queen to c7, which kind of guards the bishop, right? Like bishop takes c4, now you have dc4, and for some reason the queen is off the center line, and like even though this looks terrifying for black, it's not. You play king h8, and there's even variations, folks, where black sacks the rook. So black just literally gives up the rook completely. Stockfish thinks that this attack is stronger than whatever white can conjure up on the other side, because the squares are covered. The king is safe. The king is on h8. He's like, throwing a little party with the pawns and the pieces. But black's attack is right here. Like, these pawns are ready to roll. So the engine constantly wants to sack the rook. There's queen c7 there. And there's also knight to d6 straight away, trying to transfer the knight over here. Like, you know, in a perfect world, black just finds a way to sack the knight. Like, you see, this is very bad news. This is just very bad news. Very dangerous position for both sides. Okay. Alireza takes the bishop, though, which is a human move, but it's the wrong move. It doesn't improve his situation. He still has all the same problems. His king is open, the attack hasn't started, the center pawn is loose, he hasn't been able to play knight to d6, he still can maybe play knight d6, but then he just loses a pawn for no reason, and the king is still open. So bishop f1 is actually a step in the wrong direction for black. Okay, Alireza plays a3, this is very natural, but now what? I mean, yes, you have weakened this, but you are still 3 moves away from getting there. And the second you play knight c7 or knight b5 or whatever, I'm going here. I will pin you and I will take it. If you play knight to d6 and knight b5 and like this, then I will go this way. You play knight b5, it's mate. Congratulations, you got mated. You just hung mate. Now, you can still sack the rook. This is still the top line of the computer to meet queen g5 like this. But the attack is gone, and you have to know this with black. You have to know you can lose the rook. Otherwise, which human is going to be like, yeah, you could take my rook, whatever. No human. Humans don't play like that. They're not like, oh, you could just take my rook. They want the rook. We want the rook. Okay? So Alireza finally plays king h8, but he loses the center pawn, right? And now the only move again is the queen going to c7. It's just queen c7. I don't exactly have an explanation why, but now white can play rook f6. Losing the rook in 2 ways, but the point is that this pawn is now a killer asset. And if the queen moves to like d7, for example, white just builds behind the pawn. Bishop c5, the pawns start falling like dominoes, black's attack collapses completely. But the computer claims that there's, you know, f5, there's still some crazy counterplay. It's an insane position. But Alireza just loses his b-pawn. So he's now lost the d-pawn and the b-pawn. He's now gone from a pawn up to a pawn down, right? And where's the attack? He can now no longer get to c3. He tries rook c8, somehow, knight e4, but this move hits the queen, and now a beautiful move by Jan, bringing the queen all the way back to e1, covering this. Knight b5 is possible, but c4 disconnects the rook from the defense of the c3 square. Alireza here attacks the bishop. According to Stockfish, by the way, the top move here is bishop g1, which is one of the most disrespectful moves I've ever seen. And you almost think you want to play knight h1 here. Knight h1 is probably not what you should play, by the way, but it's still +3 for white, which is just sort of hilarious. Goes to show you that you could do Fischer random with your pieces and still be winning. That's how good his position is. But bishop a5, and at this point, Alireza has 5 minutes to make 13 moves. He goes down to like 2 minutes. Beautiful move by Jan, cutting the circulation of the black pieces here. And he guards his king. The knight tries to jump into his face here with knight b2. But I mean, every piece is about to go that way. 9 plus 5, 14, plus 6, 20, 23, and even this rook is playing. I mean, all 28 points of Jan's are playing. Can you hardly say the same about these pieces? And here it goes. Rook is coming to f4. Queen is going to hit the knight and maybe to h5 with rook h4 and checkmate coming. This knight is just hanging out. I mean, it's not doing anything. And Jan ends the game in brutal style. Oftentimes, when one king is being attacked by this much material, there is a knockout punch, sack the rook, bulldoze the pawns. You don't even need a check. But black is defenseless against rook g1, and in this position resigns the game because it's mate. It's simply mate by sacking your other rook. And like this, rook g1 check, Alireza resigns. Oh my goodness, Jan Nepomniachtchi has just won his second game in 4 tries. This man is on 3 out of 4, and he's making it look easy. These games that he's won have not been close. These games that he's won have not been close. After 4 rounds of the candidates, Jan Nepomniachtchi is in first place with 3, Caruana with 2.5, a group of guys with 2, including Hikaru, Rapport, and Duda, and then a group of guys with 1.5 out of 4, and yeah, wow. Wow. And I don't know what this means. I mean, now Nepo is looking like an early favorite, but if Nepo wins 2 candidates in a row and Magnus says no thank you, I mean, hell, put me in, coach. I'll play the World Championship match. I'll lose it. I'll still get the money. Anyway, folks, I'll see you all for round number 5. Appreciate y'all very much. Get out of here.